The planet TK7 Varuun, third moon of the Harathi Dominion's outer ring, had been scheduled for annexation for approximately 60 rotational cycles. The Harathi High Command had marked it on their star charts with the insignia of inevitable conquest, the same symbol Zeld had stamped on 43 other civilizations before it. None had lasted more than 12 cycles after first contact. Most had collapsed in 3. Earth was different only in that it had taken slightly longer to find. Supreme Warlord Grethkan Vass stood at the command center of the Eternal Dominion, his fleet's flagship, and reviewed the intelligence reports his scouts had compiled over the past 20 cycles of observation. The creatures called themselves humans, bipedal, soft-skinned, breathed an oxygen-nitrogen mixture, lived on a single world in a single star system, and had, by Harathi standards, barely scratched the surface of space travel. Their orbital stations were primitive. Their defensive satellites fired projectiles rather than energy pulses. Their faster-than-light capability was, according to the Intelligence Division, non-existent. They have one warship in deep orbit. His second-in-command, Fleet Admiral Sever, announced from across the bridge. A carrier, they call it. It houses smaller atmospheric craft. Its hull plating is iron-based composite. Their largest ground-based weaponry fires chemically propelled metal at subsonic speeds. Grethkan allowed himself the equivalent of a smile, a slow ripple of the secondary jaw flaps. Assign the second recruitment fleet, he said. Standard subjugation protocol. Disable communications. Land on 3 continents simultaneously. Neutralize any military resistance in the first 6 hours. I want their leadership on their knees before the next cycle's end. Should we deploy the 1st Strike Corps? Warlord? Sever asked. Grethkan waved a dismissive limb. Unnecessary. Send the 72nd Battalion. Let them earn their first field commendation. They've been sitting in training sectors for 4 cycles. It's time they tasted real deployment. The 72nd Battalion. 8,000 warriors fresh out of the Harathi Military Academy, equipped with standard issue phase rifles, medium-class landing ships, kinetic shield generators, and 3 tactical command vessels. By Harathi doctrine, they were classified as a recruitment unit. Not even a full combat force, the distinction was important. Recruitment units did not fight wars. They processed surrenders. General Keth Varuun, commanding officer of the 72nd, transmitted his acknowledgement with barely concealed excitement. He had waited cycles for this. A real mission. Against a pre-stellar civilization. This would be the easiest commendation in Harathi military history. He was wrong in ways he did not yet have words to describe. The landing began on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. 3 continents received simultaneous strikes. Varuun himself led the North American sector, descending with 40 landing ships into a region the humans called the American Midwest. He had chosen it strategically. Flat, open terrain, minimal natural cover, dense population centers nearby to ensure swift civilian surrender. His phase cannons went hot the moment the ships cleared the cloud layer. His shield generators hummed at full power. His warriors deployed in textbook formation, spreading across a 50-kilometer grid, in under 8 minutes. The first thing that surprised him was the noise. He had expected silence, or panic, or the distant wailing that most pre-stellar species produced upon witnessing alien landings. What he did not expect was the sound of jet engines already in the air before his scouts had fully decloaked. Human atmospheric craft, primitive, yes, but fast, and already moving in coordinated patterns that suggested they had been scrambled well before his ships broke cloud cover. Warlord, they had radar. His intelligence officer, Sub-Commander Leet, said from beside him, sounding vaguely embarrassed. Long-range detection systems. They knew we were coming approximately 40 minutes before we landed. Irrelevant, Varuun said. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Begin ground advance. The ground advance lasted 11 minutes before the first Harathi unit reported casualties. It wasn't the jet aircraft. Those were manageable, slow by Harathi standards, and the phase cannon emplacements along the landing perimeter kept them at distance. What caused the casualties was a group of 12 humans in mottled green clothing who emerged from a drainage ditch along what appeared to be an agricultural road and destroyed two phase cannon emplacements with weapons that, according to the intelligence reports, weren't supposed to be capable of penetrating Harathi field shielding. They had modified them. In 40 minutes, using components from their own destroyed vehicles, Varuun stared at the damage report. He read it a second time. He made Leet read it aloud to confirm he had not misunderstood. 12 humans, 2 phase cannons, 40 minutes of improvisation. They're retreating, one of his field commanders reported. The small unit fell back into agricultural terrain. We're pursuing. Do not pursue into cover terrain without aerial support, Varuun said sharply. Every tactical instinct he had was suddenly screaming at a frequency he hadn't expected to use on this mission. He was too late. The pursuit unit, 60 warriors, followed the 12 humans into a cornfield. 31 of those warriors came back out. By the 14th hour, what had begun as a standard subjugation had become something the Harathi military did not have an official classification for. On all 3 continents, the 72nd Battalion was holding its landing zones, but it was not advancing. Not because it lacked firepower. It had overwhelming firepower, by any rational measure. It was not advancing because every time it tried to push beyond its perimeter, it encountered organized, adaptive, furious resistance from human military units that should, by every piece of intelligence Harathi scouts had gathered, not have been this effective. General Varuun pulled up the continent-wide tactical display and tried to find the pattern. The humans were not fighting like a pre-stellar civilization caught off guard. They were fighting like a civilization that had been at war continuously for thousands of years, and had distilled every lesson into the muscle memory of every soldier on the field. They communicated on frequencies his jammers missed. Apparently because they were using old, pre-digital radio technology, his disruption arrays had never been programmed to address. They used the terrain with an intimacy that suggested every soldier had studied the specific land they were defending, rather than waiting for orders from a command center. When his forces destroyed a unit, another unit emerged from somewhere unexpected and hit a different flank. When his shields held against their conventional weapons, they stopped using conventional weapons and started using other things. Vehicles driven at high speed into emplacements, aircraft on collision courses, whose pilots ejected at the last second. Demolition charges placed by teams that had, somehow, moved through a supposedly secure perimeter. At the 30-hour mark, Varuun did something he had not done on a pre-stellar assignment in his entire career. He called for backup. The message he transmitted to the flagship was precise and professional. But Seva, who had seen Varuun handle the collapse of a Harathi garrison on a Tier 3 resistant world, heard something in the tone that made her relay it directly to Warlord Grethken without the usual processing delay. The resistance is more organized than initial intelligence suggested. Varuun's message read, I am requesting 2 additional battalions. Standard combat-ready units, not recruitment grade. Grethken read the message 3 times. Then he said very quietly, how many humans has the 72nd neutralized? Seva checked the report. Approximately 1100, Warlord. Across all 3 zones. And our losses? A pause. 1400, Warlord. The bridge went silent. 1400 Harathi warriors, trained, equipped, shielded, armed with technology generations ahead of anything their enemy possessed, had been neutralized by a pre-stellar civilization's military forces in 30 hours. In exchange for 1100 human casualties. On the first day, against a rookie battalion, conducting what was supposed to be a routine annexation. Send the 40th and 61st, Grethken said finally. Full combat configuration. And I want every piece of intelligence on human military doctrine on my display within the hour. What came back in that intelligence report would be studied in Harathi military academies for generations. The humans had been at war with each other for the entirety of recorded history. Not occasional conflict, constant, grinding, adaptive warfare across every terrain type their planet offered, against every conceivable combination of opposing forces, for approximately 10,000 years. They had developed, destroyed, redeveloped, and refined military doctrine through centuries of brutal trial and error. They had experienced cavalry warfare, trench warfare, jungle warfare, desert warfare, urban warfare, submarine warfare, aerial warfare, and guerrilla warfare. They had been invaded and had invaded. They had been conquered and had reconquered. Every human military force that existed on the planet carried within its institutional memory the accumulated lessons of every conflict that had come before it. The Harathi, by contrast, had been the dominant military force in their region of space for 800 cycles. They had fought 17 wars. All 17 had ended in relatively swift Harathi victories. Their doctrine was excellent, honed, precise. But it had been honed against opponents who, when facing obviously superior technology and numbers, had eventually done the rational thing and surrendered. Humans, the intelligence report noted with what might have been awe, did not appear to consider surrender a rational option. Or, if they did, the threshold for that rationality was set somewhere so high that the Harathi had not yet found it. They have a phrase, Leet told Varuun, reading from the cultural briefing, no surrender. Also, death before dishonor, also. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields. A human leader said that approximately 120 of their years ago, in a context where his civilization was facing almost certain defeat, they did not surrender. They won. Varuun looked out at the tactical display, where the red indicators of Harathi forces and the blue indicators of human resistance were locked in a pattern that had not meaningfully changed in 6 hours, despite the arrival of 2 additional battalions. Pull up their casualty tolerance data, he said. Leet was quiet for a moment. Warlord, there doesn't appear to be a casualty tolerance ceiling in the data we've collected. Every species has one. Most do. The humans. Their historical record shows conflicts where they sustained losses of 20, 30, 40% of their total military force, and continued fighting. Some conflicts saw civilian populations that had lost the majority of their adult male population, and still maintained armed resistance. We don't have a number for when they stop, Warlord. We don't know if there is one. Varuun turned this over in his mind for a long time. Then he transmitted a full status report to Warlord Grethkan. He included the intelligence briefing. He included the casualty figures. He included something he had never transmitted, in a field report in his career. A recommendation for withdrawal pending comprehensive strategic review. The briefing room aboard the Eternal Dominion contained 12 of the most senior military minds in the Harathi Dominion. Warlord Grethkan had called them in from their fleet assignments, which told each of them immediately that something significant had occurred. Grethkan did not summon senior staff for routine matters. What he showed them on the primary display was not routine. 48 hours of engagement, 3 full battalions, Lloyd Ash, E2nd, the 40th, and the 61st, totaling 24,000 warriors, against a pre-stellar civilization with no faster-than-light capability, no energy weapons, no kinetic shielding, and no prior knowledge of Harathi existence. Human casualties, approximately 9,000, military and civilian combined. Still fighting, Harathi casualties, over 6,300 warriors. From units that should not have taken meaningful losses against this level of opposition. The room was, for a long moment, completely silent. It was High Commander Drayeth Varn who spoke first. She had been in the Harathi military for 90 cycles and had overseen the conquest of 11 civilizations. We sent a training battalion, she said. We sent 3 battalions, Grethkan corrected her. We sent a training battalion first. against a military force with 10,000 years of continuous warfare experience. She pulled up the casualty rate analysis on her own display and studied it with the expression of someone doing mathematics that she did not enjoy. The 72nd took 58% casualties before we reinforced. Against pre-stellar infantry. With improvised modifications to captured equipment. Varuun's report noted, and several generals at the table shifted in their seats. They modified our phase cannons, said Fleet Marshal Orvan Quas. It was not a question. In 40 minutes, Grethkan confirmed. Another silence. I want to see the full historical military database, said High Commander Varuun. Everything the scouts compiled. You won't enjoy it, Grethkan said. She looked at him steadily. I didn't enjoy the last 48 hours either. Show me. What they went through over the next 3 hours was a comprehensive review of human military history. The Harathi generals were not unserious people. They had conquered civilizations. They had seen resistance. They were not by nature easily impressed. But what they were looking at was something different from the usual resistance of a conquered people. This was a species that had refined the art of warfare the way other species refined agriculture or architecture, with patience, with creativity, with an almost disturbing degree of passion, the Napoleonic formations, the trench systems of the First World War, the irregular warfare of the Second World War's Eastern Front, the doctrine of mutually assured nuclear destruction, which several generals had to have explained to them, and which produced a profound, uncomfortable stillness when the explanation landed. They built weapons capable of destroying their own civilization. As a deterrent, and it worked. They were going to destroy themselves. Fleet Marshal Quas said, with the tone of a person who has heard a fact that does not fit comfortably into any existing category. Multiple times. Leet confirmed from his position at the data terminal. They came very close on at least 3 occasions. And they're still here. Still here. Still fighting. Currently inflicting casualties on 3 battalions of Harathi warriors at a rate that I am, professionally, finding difficult to accurately project forward. High Commander Varuun closed the database. She looked at Grethkan. You sent a rookie battalion, she said, not as an accusation. More as a person confirming the coordinates of a situation before deciding what to do with them. It was supposed to be a recruitment operation, he said. Against humans. We didn't know they were humans, we knew what the scouts told us, soft, pre-stellar, iron composite hulls. Varuun was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that would be quoted in Harathi strategic literature for the next 400 years. Iron composite hulls and 10 millennia of warfare. We should have read their history before we read their hull specifications. The Harathi withdrawal was ordered 62 hours after initial landing. It was not a retreat under fire. The 3 battalions maintained their landing zones with full capability. But a deliberate strategic disengagement, transmitted with full honors, which the Harathi military used when withdrawing from a situation that required reassessment rather than simple surrender. General Varuun extracted his forces in good order. He left no equipment behind. He had, against every expectation, developed something close to respect for the humans during those 62 hours. Not affection. Not the condescending admiration one might feel for a clever animal. But the genuine, uncomfortable respect of a military commander for an opponent who had been better than expected in ways that actually mattered. Back, aboard the flagship. Warlord Grethkan stared at the planet for a long time after the last ship cleared the atmosphere. We'll need to recalibrate our entire invasion doctrine before we try again. High Commander Varuun said from beside him, if we try again, he said. She looked at him, surprised. They were defending, he said. That was a defense. On their home ground, motivated, every instinct honed, and it cost us 6,000 warriors. He paused. I've been thinking about what happens if we come back with a full invasion force. And about the fact that they would then be fighting on their home ground. Motivated, with time to prepare, having studied us during this engagement. Another pause. And I've been thinking about those nuclear weapons. Van was silent. Pull up the Conquest classification system, Grethken said finally. I want to discuss changing Earth's status. From Tier 3 resistant to what? Grethkan turned away from the display. The blue-green planet rotated slowly in the view screen behind him, beautiful and utterly unaware of how close it had come to something much worse. From Conquest target, he said, to negotiation candidate. The room was quiet. Then, from the back of the briefing table, Fleet Marshal Quas said something that made everyone in the room, including the warlord, nod slowly. Good call, he said. We only fought a rookie battalion, and they nearly made us regret it.